What's up everybody, we're back with another raid guide, and today we're taking a look at the Hivemind on Mythic difficulty. I'll be going over most of the mechanics, how to deal with them, and our overall tactic for this fight. So for this encounter you want 3 tanks, 4 healers and 13 DPS. At least one of your tanks should be a Blood DK with Conflict and Strife Essence as a major for double grips. And an extra Frost or Unholy DK doesn't hurt, grips are so useful here. And classes and specs that can deal tons of AoE excel on this encounter as well, like Arms Warrior, Fire Mage, Outlaw, etc. With that said, let's start off with what's new on Mythic. The new mechanic, or rather addition to an old one, is the Entropic Echo. When Echoing Void triggers, you will leave a Entropic Echo underneath you that detonates after roughly 2 seconds. If you stand on top of it when it detonates, you will get Nullification, which deals ticking shadow damage every 2 seconds, and you're healing immune, and it lasts for 6 seconds. Needless to say, don't stand on it. So what this means is you first have to spread when you get Echoing Void, and directly after find a safe spot, since you can run into other players' echoes as well. It's very simple to deal with as long as the raid spreads well with Echoing Void. Just don't try to min-max the spread, just make space. And if you're not a melee DPS or tank, don't spread in melee during it to allow for a bit more space. Next out is the acidic Akir eggs. These will now seep out acid until they hatch. Not much to do about that, just don't stand on the eggs. Other than that, there's a lot of numerical values that have gone up, like Mind Numbing Nova. It now reduces your haste by 100% up from 50% if you miss an interrupt. Also, if you get hit by one of the roly acid boys, the corrosion debuff now increases damage taken by 50% up from 25%. And just like any other mythic boss, everything hurts more. The biggest part of this encounter really is managing ads and not getting hit by the acid boys. So before we go over the encounter, let's talk ads. And more specifically the Akir darters. Managing these is key for the encounter, and they can be a pain to say the least. So our approach for these ads was 2 DKs, 1 Blood DK who was our 3rd tank, and 1 Unholy DK just for an extra grip. The DPS check on this fight is quite rough, so you really want the darters to be on top of either Kasir if Tetris is away due to Hivemind, or on top of both of them if you're stacking them. So as soon as these darters spawn, we had our Blood DK grip 2 of them, and our Unholy DK grip the last one to get them near or on top of the boss. As soon as they got grip, we put a binding shot on top of the boss and followed up with stuns after. If they get a cast off, they will jump away, sometimes to the other side of the room, which is not good. So the goal is to CC them as much as possible to interrupt their cast, but also doing this without making them immune to all of your crowd controls, which they do get pretty fast if people are trigger happy. You can stun, fear, incap, knockback, root, pretty much anything to keep them from getting a cast off. If they do get one off and dart away, odds are they're going to be immune to grip, so you won't be able to rely on that to get them back into position. So for example, we grip them in, binding shot into stuns. If you have Paladin's Prio Hammer of Justice on them, follow up the stuns with Dragon's Breath or blinds like Blinding Light to interrupt the cast, and you cycle through your CCs like that. You can also use Ring of Peace to knock them in or to keep them from jumping out. However, again, odds are they might be immune to that type of CC already. The TLDR version, get them on top of boss, make sure they don't get a cast off. And lastly, before we delve into the fight itself, make sure to have a interrupt rotation for Kasir. It cannot get a single cast off or you'll most likely wipe or blow all your healing cooldowns and wipe later. With that said, let's go over the encounter. Due to the nature of this fight, I'll be covering it by a step-by-step basis. So on pull, we stack up the bosses near the left pillar, or ramp if you will, where we have our red mark. Everyone should stack on top of the bosses, pop Bloodlust and full nuke on Tetris. Do make sure that you are stacked on top of the bosses so all the drone ads stack up nicely when they spawn, and have your 3rd tank, Mr. Grippy Tank, pick up the Ravager ad and pull it under the boss for cleaving. Ideally you want to kill it off before its 3rd tank dot. Depending on your Grippy Tank's gear, he can either take 1 stack, then the Kasir tank taunts it off, or 2 stacks if he can survive it. After your first Echoing Void, start moving the bosses in raid to avoid the acid puddles from the drone ads, finish off the Ravager ad, and get ready for your first darters. During this, you will also have to deal with the acid boys rolling around, and as I previously mentioned, if you get hit, you will take 50% increased damage for 16 seconds, so really do go out of your way to dodge to these. Get the darters on top of the boss, keep them CC'd with stuns, blinds, dragon's breath, etc., and try to finish them off before the Hivemind switches. When the Hivemind swaps, pull Khazir to the middle of the room where we have our skull mark, spread for Echoing Void, then immediately stack again on skull for the new Akir drones. As soon as these spawns, we had our Blood DK mass grip all of them on top of Khazir so that we could start AoEing them faster. We ignore the volatile drone that spawns during this and just heal through it instead, so don't waste any DPS on it. And shortly after this you will get new acid boys rolling around. When they spawn, pull Khazir to where we have our purple mark, dodge the acid boys, then spread for Echoing Void. After this you will get a new set of darters, deal with them the same way as before, then move Khazir if needed if there's a ton of acid pools around him. Try and get the darters down before the Hivemind swaps to allow you to maximize DPS on Tetris when you do stack them. Keep dodging the acid boys, then get ready for a new set of drones, a Ravager and another Echoing Void. Same thing as before, have your grippy tank pick up the Ravager and DPS should swap to it. If possible, try and get it down before the new set of darters spawn. Then deal with the darters as usual, cause shortly after these you will have a very fun overlap with Echoing Void into Volatile Drone, regular drones and acid boys, so it's a pretty hectic overlap with a lot of raid damage going on. Directly after the Volatile Drone burst, you will get a new set of darters and Echoing Void. Deal with the darters, then dodge some acid boys. After this you want to stack the bosses again when Hivemind swaps. And following this is your burn phase, if you will. You will get new drones, a Ravager, and shortly after that some new darters. These darters and Ravagers you do not need to kill, hence the burn phase. Just have the grippy tank pick up the Ravager and CC the darters wherever they are. Just keep them from getting cast off to minimize raid damage, but you don't have to have them on top of boss for cleave. And then you just blast the bosses. The tricky parts of this encounter is dealing with darters, dodging acid boys, and making sure Tetris HP is fairly even to Khazir's. Since you constantly AoE all the drones and darters, Ravager on top of Khazir, his HP will naturally go down a lot faster than Tetris, and if you don't work around this, you will never catch up. So it is very important that on pull with Bloodlust and all your cooldowns that you tunnel Tetris as much as possible while still killing that Ravager fairly fast. You should always have all dots up on Tetris, and anytime you can spare range DPS from ads or any moment where there aren't ads up, range should tunnel Tetris as much as possible. During the last burn you will be able to even it out as long as the HP difference isn't too big. On our kill, Khazir was around 12% and Tetris was around 25% when we stacked them up for the final burn, where we ignored the ads. So we just had everyone hard swap to Tetris and it evened out fairly fast at that point. This fight requires a lot of coordination, pre-planned movement and healing CD usage to get through, so make sure you have all of that set up before, where to move, when to use your cooldowns, etc. And with that said, this fight is heavily scripted, which is why I opted to just go through the fight in this guide instead of saying if X happens, do Y. And I think that pretty much covers everything. If you have any questions at all or run into any issues during your progression, hit me up on Facebook or become a Patreon. As a Patreon, you will get access to my Discord where you can find things like weak auras, healing notes, and a ton of awesome people helping each other out during progression. It is also the fastest way to get a hold of me. And as always, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button, leave me a like, and ring that notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.